Senator Elizabeth Warren is gaining ground in the 2020 Democratic presidential field. A new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows her with a slim 1-point edge over former Vice President Joe Biden. And Senator Bernie Sanders isn't far behind them.
This poll includes Democratic voters in the first 18 caucus and primary states. Ed O'Keefe has the latest from Capitol Hill.
This poll isn't a story of Joe Biden slipping. It's more a story of Elizabeth Warren on the rise. The survey finds that she's generating more enthusiasm among Democrats who now also believe she has a better shot than before at defeating President Trump.
Hello, New Hampshire Democrats!
Senator Elizabeth Warren earned an enthusiastic response at the New Hampshire Democratic Convention, where 19 presidential candidates spoke over the weekend. The new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows Warren edging out Joe Biden in the Granite State by 1 point. Biden maintains his lead in Iowa and is blowing away the field in South Carolina, where he has strong support with African Americans. But in Nevada, Senator Bernie Sanders is now in front of Biden and Warren with 29% support.
We got a revolution to make. You ready to do it?
The poll also finds that Warren is picking up the most support from voters changing their minds. For example, 29% of voters who previously supported California Senator Kamala Harris have switched to supporting Warren. It was a rough weekend for Harris, who had to apologize after a man attending one of her town halls called President Trump's actions mentally retarded. And she responded with,
Well said. Well said.
Harris later told CBSN's Caitlin Huey-Burns she didn't hear the man's full comments.
It was not something that I really heard or processed or, or in any way condone. That's for sure.
Meanwhile, former South Carolina Governor and Congressman Mark Sanford announced he is going to challenge President Trump for the Republican nomination.
This is the beginning of a long walk, but it begins with that first step, and that's what I'm announcing here today.
Sanford is now the third Republican attempting to challenge the president for the Republican nomination, but in a sign of how tricky it might be for them, at least 4 states, including Sanford's home state of South Carolina, are planning on canceling their GOP primaries, believing that the president's popular enough with Republicans that he'll win in a big way. As for the Democrats, they're preparing for their debate Thursday night when Biden and Warren will be center stage in Houston. Anne-Marie and Vlad?
All right, Ed, thanks very much. For more on this, let's bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. So, Caitlin, good to see you.
Good morning.
You had a good opportunity to chat with a lot of these candidates over the weekend. So this latest Battleground Tracker poll is really interesting. And I was talking to Anthony Salvanto in the CBS This Morning Green Room about this. It does show that this race is tightening between Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. What I find really intriguing is what Ed said, which is that it's not so much that Biden is slipping, it's that Warren is rising.
Right.
What did she say to you?
Right. Well, Warren's campaign has been, unlike all these other campaigns who have been going up and down in the polls, her rise has been pretty consistent. And their campaign determined very early on that they wanted to focus on their ground efforts, their organizing efforts. So they hired a lot of people very quickly up front, and that seems to be paying off in some of these early states. I will say, being in New Hampshire, it was a hometown crowd for her, certainly, but the applause and cheering that she received really was unlike anything that I'd seen in that state recently. So she certainly has enthusiasm on her side. And what was interesting in the poll, not only is she gaining from other candidates, more and more supporters of her are saying that she can defeat Donald Trump, which was a big liability for her going into this election.
Let me ask you a question about Senator Bernie Sanders, because a lot of his supporters, they're very vocal.
Right.
They are very active on social media. And I think the media narrative at the start of this race was that, well, Warren and Senator Sanders have similar outlooks and similar policy proposals, but they really kind of don't. It only seems that way because they've sort of made an unspoken rule or agreement to not attack each other directly. They may change on Thursday, but are you seeing that people are that she's peeling off Bernie supporters to her campaign.
It certainly is the biggest competition at this point, and as long as Bernie is in this race, the two of them will likely be kind of in attracting some similar voters, but they do go about it in very different ways, especially in a state like New Hampshire, where you get to meet voters one-on-one. It's a very small state. You get to travel around a lot. Bernie Sanders had targeted, non-college educated white voters in that state successfully in 2016. Won the primary there. Elizabeth Warren has been, banking on kind of her personal one-on-one interactions with people. She stays for hours after her events to take selfies with people, up to 50,000 selfies she has said so far. And she's really kind of counting on that retail politics and her kind of personal story, something that Bernie Sanders doesn't necessarily focus on. So they are attracting different kinds of voters in some ways, or approaching this a little bit differently. Bernie Sanders, too, wants to try to peel off some Biden supporters, perhaps in New Hampshire as well. But our battleground poll shows that both Biden and Warren are leading Sanders in that
You actually
state.
got a chance to talk to her about her momentum over the weekend. You caught up with her. I want to play some of that sound.
To what do you attribute your rise?
Yeah. I think it's about what I fight for and how I fight. And then I ask people to be part of it. We've got a real problem in this country, and that is that our democracy has been taken over by the wealthy and the well-connected. I'm running a campaign that gives people a chance to own their democracy and to make this government work for them.
So that sounds like the answer that she would give. What do you see happening?
Well, it was interesting, too. I asked her if she kind of considered herself a front runner or thought that she would be in this position. And she said, no, I'm in this with all the people who are supporting me, and we're kind of doing this together. What I think is interesting, however, is that we're shifting into somewhat of a new phase here. She's going to be on the debate stage with Joe Biden and everybody else for the first time. All of these other debates, she's been kind of either on her own, or it's just been her and Bernie Sanders. We really haven't gotten to see that big contrast that she can provide to someone like Joe Biden. So I asked if she's preparing differently. She said no, but these debates are kind of difficult to really debate, but she has proven that she can be successful at them. What I'm wondering, though, is as she continues to rise, do these other contenders who are trying to move up in the polls, who are trying to gain their own momentum, start attacking her? Does the scrutiny phase start applying to Elizabeth Warren from the other contenders? She has survived so far several other controversies, including numerous attacks from Donald Trump. Do the other candidates sense that they need to go after her to advance their own campaigns, or do they sit back for now?
Real quick on Vice President Biden, I was again talking to Salvanto about this, Anthony Salvanto, our elections director, and he pointed out that the vice president's people feel that South Carolina is going to be a good benchmark for them. Obviously, that means that they're really banking on the African American votes to come in for the vice president, which shows him to still be viable with that demographic. The question, though, of course, becomes what these candidates haven't been pressed on is the vice president's gaffes and the things that he said and the explanations that he has given recently for those gaffes, getting whole stories absolutely wrong and then saying it's not important that he got them wrong. Democrats are, I don't think, going to take to a message of don't believe what I said, just believe in the message, because that's what a lot of Democrats feel President Trump is doing.
Well, it's interesting because I posed this question to a lot of different voters when I was in South Carolina a couple weeks ago while Biden was there, and it kind of helps explain why the campaign believes that South Carolina might be its saving grace or its firewall, because a lot of voters there thought that, the president makes similar gaffes, we don't really care about it. This is voters in South Carolina that we talked to. And they also said that it kind of makes Biden more human, is what I heard a lot from voters, at least in South Carolina. The big question is, what do voters in New Hampshire and Iowa? They go first. What do they think of Biden? A lot of voters I talked to over the weekend did mention Biden as someone they thought was the most electable, but at this point, still have several months to go. Can he survive without coming in first in Iowa and New Hampshire? The campaign told us last week that they don't necessarily have to win Iowa, but what kind of momentum does that create or slow down a campaign when you don't do well in those first states?
Yeah, it's really
That's what we'll be figuring out.
The vice president during that town hall debate on climate change came in and he basically said things that I felt were sort of like things that you've heard in past political races. We're the greatest country in the world. We're not like this. We can fix this. I know how to fix it. Whereas some of the other candidates said, day one, I'm going to do this. By day 356 or whatever, I'm going to have done this. And there were some specific meaty proposals that you could actually hold them accountable for, as opposed to the rhetoric that we're the greatest country in the world and we want to be better.
And this is the contrast we're going to see with Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden later on this week. What you just described from Joe Biden and what Elizabeth Warren has been calling, I have a plan for that. And that has really gained a lot of momentum, at least at this stage in the campaign.
Yeah, that's kind of been his style, his almost entire political career, is this kind of like, but you know me.
Right. I'm Joe.
Yeah,
I take the
And that pays
Acela.
off in some places. African-American voters, especially older voters, really resonate with that. But, the energy in the party, where is that right now? Elizabeth Warren seems to be capturing a lot of that, at least at this point in time.